Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle McLeese, and today I'll be sharing with you the results of Provost Faculty Fellowship number 2, which I conducted in the spring of 2024. So a little bit about the project. I was tasked with examining how to recruit and retain successful and representative faculty here at USM. And in order to achieve this, I felt like I needed to look at three important questions, namely, why did our current faculty come to USM in the first place? And then once they got here, what are some of the things that they most enjoy about being faculty and what keeps them here? As well as what are some of the challenges or the problems that they're facing. Now, I knew I had some options and that I could look at, say, a survey or I could do interviews. And I knew interviews, I would only be able to do a small number and they'd be more time intensive. But I did decide that I needed to do qualitative semi-structured interviews to try and explore a little bit more detail about people's backgrounds, their story for how they got here, and then also kind of the good, bad, and ugly. In order to achieve this, I asked for a list that I was provided from the provost office of faculty, full-time permanent faculty across colleges, across ranks, across campuses, and I sent an email to 36 total faculty that I got from three different sampling frames, but I had divided my sample into faculty who identified as white and faculty who identified as non-white. I did this in an attempt to try and answer some of the representative question, but also to try and see if I could get as much variety and diversity of sampling as possible. In total, I had a 44% response rate. I did go through IRB approval. I had 16 faculty agree to be interviewed. Interviews ranged in time from about 20-ish minutes to approximately 40-ish, let's say 22 to about 44 minutes in time. I provided each faculty member who agreed to sit down with me either in person or virtually with a $25 Amazon gift card. And the main topics, as I mentioned at the outset of this project, were to really dig into the story or the history of how that faculty member got here, the benefits of being a faculty member in their perspective, as well as challenges. Just wanted to provide some basic demographics. As you can see, half of my sample identified as white, non-Hispanic, a quarter were Asian Pacific Islander, and then just under 13% each Black or white Hispanic. My sample was fairly female heavy. Just under 69% of my sample identify as female, and the remaining nearly 32% as male. And then you can see the ranges of age. Primarily, my sample is between ages 30 and 59, but I also had faculty age 20 to 29 and 60 to 69. As I mentioned before, one of my goals was to try and be as broad reaching as possible. Therefore, I did get faculty, although mostly just under 82% on the Hattiesburg campus. I did get a few respondents who came from Gulf Park, widely cast, right? So across, it could be, it wasn't necessarily just on the Gulf Park campus, could have been in any affiliation of USM within that area. And then I had assistant teaching professors, associate professors, full professors, instructors, and lecturers. I also was able to get a wide casting among my sample of the colleges, and that was a big goal to make sure that even though I knew I couldn't sample necessarily by school, that I wanted to try and get people across all of our colleges. I was able to get half of the sample from arts and sciences. And then as you can see here, just under 19% of the faculty from education and human sciences, nursing and health professions, and then just under 13% from business and economic development. So as I mentioned before, my desire was to do a more in-depth exploratory qualitative analysis. I did interviews in person or virtually based on comfort level of the interviewee. I recorded all of the interviews. I had one graduate student help me to transcribe. And then I very carefully de-identified all of the transcripts and deleted all videos, and then used the in vivo software to help me do analyses. And I used some coding as outlined by Saldana. First, I started with open coding, then I moved to in vivo coding, and then I had focus coding, again, starting from those main topics that I mentioned before. So what did I find? By and large, the reasons that faculty found themselves coming to USM had to do with just under 69% of the sample had some previous tie to USM where they were a student before. Might have been at the bachelor's level, the master's level, doctoral level, but they had some sort of connection. Then just under 44% of the sample said someone had specifically said, hey, you should come to Southern, or you should apply to come here. Just under 38% said that they were from Mississippi or already lived here, so it made sense for them and they went ahead and applied. A quarter argued, or not argued, said that they were attracted by a particular position or program, and that was why they applied. Just under 19% said that USM was the first to make an offer, and the interview experience was very pleasant and they could see themselves working here, and so they did agree to come here, and they've been here ever since. And then just under 13%, or a couple of the interviewees, said a specific grant or research opportunity was a motivating factor to bringing them here. In terms of findings of what the faculty benefits were, the main themes were a love of students and teaching. That was almost the entire sample. So just under 94% of my faculty, 15 out of 16, said this. To give a little bit more context, the faculty said that they loved teaching and their experiences were very rewarding with students, and this is what made them love that aspect. They enjoyed seeing the growth of students, interactions with students, and some of them talked about feeling called to teach or to serve. 13 out of the 16, so just under 82%, said that they felt supported. And when they talked about support, it ranged from administrative to support to in-unit department program support. Some faculty felt that their support was actually lacking in their program, but they found support elsewhere. Others felt the opposite, that they had support within their program, but not outside of the program or not outside of their school. Some faculty felt especially supported by having financial means or resources, money to travel to conferences, facilities or equipment that they needed for their research, opportunities to do study abroad, and to receive professional development or support from programs out of the Center for Faculty Development, particularly workshops, and AQ was specifically mentioned and discussed by 6 of the faculty. And then finally, one of the main faculty benefits that was discussed over and over again was autonomy and flexibility. That was just over 62% of my sample. So faculty stressed the importance of having autonomy in teaching, in service, and in research, how being able to have that flexibility and not being micromanaged was crucial. And they also talked about flexibility of curricula, the development of the curricula, course design, course delivery, course offerings when they would be, say, in the classroom, and other scheduling flexibilities. And this was very important to them. I will talk a little bit later about how some of the support that they discussed actually was tied to mentorship, and that's an area that I will give a little bit more attention to after I discuss challenges. In looking at problems or challenges that faculty had, they said that lack of institutional and financial support, so just under 69% said this was a problem or a main challenge here. 50% of my sample said they actually lack social support, and 50% said being underpaid was a main challenge. And I'll address the other two here momentarily, but I just want to talk about a lack of financial and institutional support as opposed to lack of social support. So when faculty talked about a lack of institutional or financial support, they said that they felt communication was lacking and problematic. That made them feel like they weren't supported, not having transparency in what was being decided or happening at various levels, from higher administration to dean to program level. Some folks talked about being in a constant state of the university doing their best. In some cases later on, I'll talk about how some folks actually saw this as a positive, but some faculty actually said this was a negative, in particular because it meant we don't have enough money or resources, they would say. This also didn't change the lack of serious financial capital or loss, right? So saying that we do more with less or that we lack financial support is actually kind of depressing. Several folks actually sometimes jokingly, but sometimes, I think trying to put a positive spin would say, if we could just get a millionaire to donate some money to us, or if we could get a billionaire, if we could win the lottery. And this was said on multiple occasions by different faculty. Failure to adapt, particularly around university processes that were taking too long to occur or outdated. That could be anything from faculty hiring, getting vetted through the system, having reimbursements for conference travel, and more. When discussing lack of social support, faculty talked about feeling frustrated that they felt like they weren't being heard, particularly when they would voice concerns about lack of resources, and this made them feel devalued. Many discussed having too high of a workload, and this made them feel devalued or lacking in social support. When programs, colleges, and the university don't consult with faculty or keep them in the loop, they also not only feel that they lack institutional or financial support, but they also feel they lack social support. Again, back to the theme of not feeling valued. When procedures or mentorship is lacking, faculty can feel lost. And again, I'll discuss mentorship separately in another slide. And lack of clear expectations around workload was said to be frustrating on multiple fronts and led to faculty working more and unable to connect or help build with community, which is another theme I'll discuss here momentarily. Faculty also discussed the stressors of being underpaid, not just in general or in their field, but relative to other peer institutions, and then especially in Mississippi compared to peer institutions. Some discussed that it was hard to continue to remain loyal or stay loyal to the institution. And many talked about, or I shouldn't say many, some of the faculty talked about, having been on the market or look to leave to find another position elsewhere. And then the last two challenges discussed were teaching challenges, just over 31% of the sample. And, they talked about how they understood that that's part of the nature of teaching, but that struggling to adapt to teaching with the workload, having to change course offerings, not having a consistent 2-year rotation, not knowing how to teach, not having a lot of resources to teach. In fact, that's where some talked about AQ or Center for Faculty Development Quality Matters being really instrumental. And then turnover, people not staying. And this was referenced both for faculty as well as seeing staff turnover. And then just really quickly, I wanted to mention mentorship. So mentorship is really connected to some of the pros and cons, right? Those who have mentorship and have quality mentorship talk about it being a big benefit and something that helps them feel valued, whereas those who lack it talk about how they notice that it's lacking or that it makes them feel not valued. So just over 80% of my sample had an official mentor assigned to them, but of the 13 that said they had a mentor, 69% or 9 of them said that their mentors are what I'm characterizing as active mentors. I wouldn't be where I am currently without them because they took me under their wing. I met with this person for coffee or for regular meetings for check-in. I was guided through scholarship and research. I feel like I am cared for as a person. I know how to move through promotion and tenure. The remaining faculty who didn't have assigned mentorship said it was likely because they were older in the process, meaning like they'd been at the institution longer and that wasn't seen as sort of part of the culture, that they were more senior in their particular field, or maybe they were the only person in that field or subfield. I think it's important to point out on that last slide, the majority of faculty had been assigned a mentor, but the 69% of that 13 who said, oh, but these were like instrumental people, those remaining faculty who had an assigned mentor, they felt they had more passive mentorship. They didn't say that, but that's what they described. This person would say like, "Hey, I'm here for you. Let me know when you have questions." And that sometimes made faculty feel like, well, but what am I going to ask you? I don't know what I don't know. So that was really glaring to me and something worth noting. Um, this is also one of the reasons why a faculty fellowship will be investigating mentorship in more depth this semester. And then finally, I asked about community and culture, in part because I'm interested as a social scientist about community, and the literature is fairly clear that when people feel like they have a community, they belong, they feel like they have a purpose or useful, valued. This bodes well, not just in personal living spaces, but also in workplaces. And so I asked folks about their personal definitions of community and then their characterization of culture at Southern Miss. So just over 43% of my sample said community to them meant having support or feeling supported. And just under 38% said it could also be or instead be being or feeling connected to others. So knowing that you have someone that you can rely on or that you can count on or that you can reach out to, feeling a sense of belonging, or I have people I can collaborate with, doesn't necessarily mean we have to be best friends and collaborate all the time. We have shared values or beliefs. We're working together with minimal conflict. In some cases, faculty characterized wanting to have like a work family or feeling they had a work family or that's something that was important to them. Whereas others were a little bit more intentional about, well, I don't know that I'd call them family, but just knowing that I have team members or people that I can go and work with and I don't hate every moment doing that. Recognizing that they realize that, people are complicated and things might be difficult at times, but more often than not, it was going to be smooth sailing. About 68% of my sample said that they felt they had some form of community from various sources or places. But what was particularly interesting to me was that some of these faculty said the more support they felt they had, the more likely they wanted to stay. Whereas those that were in not feeling supported or feeling minimally supported had talked about thinking about leaving or locating elsewhere, even if it wasn't something that was an option for them to say move out of state or move outside of academia, maybe not be at this particular institution, right? So that was something that was really important. Um, just under 38% said that there were difficulties, disconnections, or feelings of separation and division that I thought were worth noting. And the more of that there was, the more negative or the less valued people felt. I also asked how they would characterize the culture of Southern Miss. And half of my sample said, positive or supportive. Things were getting better. Some people said, I'd mentioned this before, we do more with less, like, we're resourceful, whereas some other people felt that that was a negative because it meant we didn't have a lot or our workload was increasing. But, also we have a culture of helping. We're inclusive. The place feels like home. We're welcoming, not just to students, but to one another. But just under 38% said that they felt the way they would characterize the culture is that it was challenging or lacking, being trapped inside of their program or their bubble. Their school was too big, or they couldn't really collaborate or build community. The impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, disruptions, particularly around water cooler talk, or interactions with colleagues that used to be there before and how that was having an impact, a feeling of not being valued or a sense of elitism, particularly among ranks, tenure versus teaching track, or instructor lecture versus teaching a tenure track, right? Those sorts of things. Maybe even at times disciplinary antagonism, but it was more so stated that, the culture felt more intense at times with around ranks or around titles. Um, and then a sense of feeling of pressure, being in survival mode or feeling a lot of intensity, especially around the lack of funds or resources, turnover, and drops in enrollment. And so, as a result of all the things that I found, I made several recommendations to leadership. The first was to do a follow-up survey of faculty to see if this sort of patterns that I noticed in my interviews would hold true to a larger sample size, right, with a larger N. Also, increasing supports, building community and positive community and culture, not the toxic kind, not where we force people to get involved, but provide avenues and opportunities for those who crave it, who want it, and who desire it. Improving communication across the board and at all levels. And then also a particular emphasis on mentorship and on active mentorship as opposed to passive mentorship. Increasing pay to bring it in line with peer institutions, noting that, having merit-based raises is a nice beginning, but that there's a need for more intentional building in the system of more raises, but also addressing issues of compression for people who've been here longer, inflation, and so on. Decreasing workload where and when possible, noticing that its workload is not the same across the board, and that it's really important for there to be a sense of fairness, and that you don't have some people doing so much more than others, especially if they're not wanting to do more. And then charging a study for staff to assess their needs. The scope of this project was specifically faculty, but enough concern around turnover of faculty and staff makes it so that wherever possible to try and assess the needs of staff. And that, in a nutshell, is the presentation, the main points. I welcome any feedback. If anyone would like a copy of the slides, or you'd like to, ask me questions, or you want to dig in more detail, I am always happy to have a conversation about it. So thank you for your time and your attention. And I am going to end this recording now.